let's talk about some of the exciting stuff, right? So we're at this moment right now, where we are facing a climate crisis. There's a lot of conversation about what we need to do, and we know that we do need to mitigate the levels of fossil fuels that we're burning to produce electricity. In the United States, in particular, we had a period where we were building out a lot of nuclear facilities, and that's ground to a halt for the most part. I mean, sitting here right now, February 2023, what are some of the steps that we really need to be pushing forward, to try to get more nuclear power? And also, if you could talk a little bit about the work y'all are doing at the campaign for a green nuclear deal.
Yeah, so I think in the past year, basically since the onset of the energy crisis, we've are solidly done with step one, which is recognizing that we need a plan for nuclear. I
Hmm.
think the volatility of fossil fuels, the invasion of Ukraine, what's happening in Europe has scared politicians in the US. And luckily, we have abundant natural gas, we have coal, we have a lot of room for error. But if we are going to meet our decarbonization targets, we need a plan for nuclear. We need to have that solid backbone of clean electricity for our decarbonization. So that's step one, recognition. But there's a long way between there and, a France or 1970s USA style build out of nuclear power. And I think it could work in a lot of different ways. We've seen it nuclear power deployed publicly, either in France or through the TVA. We've seen
Hmm.
it done by private utilities, often with strong government backing. There's a number of different models that we can pull from, but throughout the history of the industry, there have been key um, key elements to all successful nuclear programs. And I think the two really big ones that would be next for us would be the commitment to a build out.
Hmm.
So we can't afford to just build one more nuclear power plant in this country. We can afford to build 100 more, even better, 200 more, but we can't do one off projects. We know that nuclear costs are brought down by building over and over, by gaining experience, by having established supply chains. And then that gets into the second thing, which is that the most successful nuclear programs have really centered around one or two standardized designs. So right now in the US, we have a lot of different reactor companies and designs and advanced reactors, and we're kind of treating it like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. But really what's important is, what do you have experience building? Stick with it and build it over and over again. The actual design, I know this sounds weird, but I've talked to engineers about this. The actual design is less important than the decision to stick with the design. So that's why Vogel, in my opinion, at first was a disaster. You picked a
Hmm.
brand new design. It's no wonder it's way over budget and behind schedule. But now we have this workforce. We've had the growing pains of building a mega nuclear project, and we're going to waste it unless we commit to building out more AP1000s, training up more crews, using that experience that we learned to build more AP1000s. So, I this is not like from any particular wonky technology preference,
Hmm.
and I am excited about things like smaller reactors to repower coal plants. But I think if we're really serious, it's going to require a level of government involvement, mainly on planning and
Hmm.
coordinating this build out, that it's hard to say if we're ready for, or what, it's hard to know if that will be practical anytime soon.
I mean, in my opinion, we need to get this out by whatever sort of is available to us. My preference would be to have, these things be federally funded, and to build out more TVA style stuff. I think my friend Matt Huber and Fred Stafford have a big piece coming out on that soon. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, because one of the big criticisms outside of the kind of other arguments is that nuclear power is expensive and it costs a decent amount to start up. But as you were saying, it's like anything. Like the first cars were very expensive to produce, but then once you're able to mass produce them, it becomes a lot easier to do so. And if you think about what it takes to build a new nuclear plant today, you got to train the engineers, you got to find the sourcing, you got to build the plants, you got to figure all this kind of stuff. And if we're doing it on a mass scale, these costs go down significantly. But I wanted to talk because I'm curious what you think about the small modular reactors, right? These smaller nuclear plants that you can, as you were saying, just plop down into a coal plant because they're already hooked up
Mhm.
to the grid. I mean, one thing that I think is really exciting about this is these kind of concepts of a just transition, right? Like a lot of the labor and expertise that went into powering and utilizing fossil fuels could be translated with some level of training over into power and nuclear. And it's one of those things where to those communities that, we all know the problem with fossil fuels, but at the same time, like we had electricity in this country that like was incredibly important historically, economically, and culturally to people. And, to take to those communities where, they're being told, okay, but those jobs are going to go away, say, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing to power the society. Here's how we can bring this into the future. And, this is why we really, really need you. I think is something that's very, very politically viable. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. That's what, you asked about what Campaign for a Green Nuclear Deal is doing. Right now, I'm based in Chicago, and we're working really hard to lift the nuclear moratorium
Mhm.
in Illinois. And it's crazy, right? This is the most nuclear powered state in the nation. And 90% of our clean electricity is nuclear. It's over half of the state's total electricity. We already have this strong
Wait, so it's 90% in
ecosystem.
Chicago?
It's 90% of our carbon-free
Okay,
electricity
yeah,
and
yeah.
about half of the state's
So for
electricity.
people who we have a lot of listeners in Chicago, like if you're living in
Mhm.
Chicago, you're benefiting from the system already, and you don't need to be scared about talking about building it out anyway.
Right. I mean, and now our nuclear plants have given customers a $1 billion rebate in the
Hmm.
past year, thanks to policy we got included in the 2021 energy bill. So you can be even more vocal about it now because people are seeing a little line item that's saving them money every month. Um, but but we still have our second largest source of power is coal. And so a lot of downstate is extremely skeptical of what's coming out of Springfield with regards to our energy transition. We're
Hmm.
saying we need to shut off 3 Hoover Dams worth of coal in the next 7 years. So your plants and your jobs and the economic engines of your towns are going to be shut down, and they don't really have a plan for replacing those jobs. Just like renewables don't replace fossil fuels like for like, renewable jobs do not replace fossil fuel jobs like for like. We
Hmm.
don't produce most of the solar and wind in the US. That gets produced abroad. So really you have installation, and those jobs are temporary and often low wage. They're located outside of the communities.
Hmm.
These are not major sources of tax revenues for communities. So, how do you expect to get people on board with a massive decarbonization effort if you're taking away their livelihoods? Whereas with coal to nuclear, you can say, we want to allow you to maintain your purpose. We want you to keep being an energy community. We want to retrain so that you can maintain jobs in your communities. We're going to give you an even better tax base.
Hmm.
These are generational jobs. This is a long-term strategy. So I think it's a really winning message on the left. And now it's more like convincing kind of older centrist Democrats that it's okay to be for nuclear now and that the winds are changing and it's time to get on board.
But I'm curious, so I remember when Bernie put out the plan for a Green New Deal, being very excited, and we had Matt Huber on the program last week to sort of talk about what the after effects of the Green New Deal were, and like there was a lot in it that was very exciting, but I think one of the most clear examples of why it wasn't successful in the end was that it really got held up and heralded by like a kind of NGO green left group of people, and the union buy-in was really, really limited. I'm curious, like if you have any thoughts on like the role for union and organized labor in sort of pushing for a green nuclear deal.
I mean, it was interesting because in the battle for over that energy legislation that I was just talking about in Illinois, one of the issues was that two Illinois nuclear plants were going to be closed prematurely because they
Hmm.
were just getting outcompete in the market by historically cheap natural gas and it heavily subsidized renewables. So the unions came out en masse to just support nuclear power.
Hmm.
And in attending their rallies and working with the leadership, I asked, is this something that you think that your workers, your members in coal communities would support? And they said, absolutely. They wish they had the nuclear jobs because they know it's an automatic 20% wage bump.
Hmm.
They know how safe these plants are. They know how good the schools in the communities that have nuclear plants are. So I really think there's a huge political block that the left is ignoring. And nuclear could be that common ground where it brings together the working class, the right, who may
Hmm.
not care as much about combating climate change, but really cares about energy security and bringing back big industry. And I don't know. I think the unions where the unions continue to be strong, unfortunately, the unions just are not what they used to
Hmm.
be. They've been really eroded, and it's quite sad. But in a place like Illinois, that is the only reason we've been so successful at protecting our nuclear power is because of those unions. And I think those unions are why we are going to also lead the nation in deploying new nuclear power.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, just on the level of jobs for communities, like regardless of its truthfulness, I know, you know, there are different interpretations of the history of Texas and oil, but like for working class families, like there is this kind of understand this is a job you can get, and you can take care of yourself, you can take care of your family. Again, the oil industry is very, very predatory, and we know all of that history. But even just in people's minds, being able to sort of speak to that in the level, saying like, here's the future, um, you know, um, industry, power industry, energy industry, and it provides not only abundant energy for folks, but as you were saying, permanent jobs. Because when I talk to friends
Right.
in the electrical industry or IBEW members, they say all the time about one of the big things that's really frustrating about all the solar deployment is the jobs pay like shit. They're really dangerous, and oftentimes you're getting paid per panel. And what that means for you as a worker is like you're trying to put on as many panels as possible. Oftentimes people go out there by themselves, which is just like logistically really dangerous,
Right.
because they're getting a pittance for this kind of thing. And there's this green halo around the industry that has sort of allowed it to, do the same kind of stuff that all the other extractive industries do. And nuclear has a potential to really be something that's permanent, high paying, and can support like a large community, so you don't see these towns sort of just completely get eroded and disappear and everyone has to leave,
Right.
when the times
And
change.
And that's the beautiful thing about nuclear is it's a lot of highly skilled trades,
Hmm.
and it's a lot of the jobs at the nuclear plant don't require a college degree. So nuclear operator is one of the highest paying jobs you can get, and you can have a high school diploma. In fact, 60% of nuclear operators in the US don't have a college degree. So if we're
Hmm.
seeing increasingly more commentary about, how useful are degrees for making your way up in the world. Nuclear is one way that you can, the Simpsons got it right in this
Yeah.
respect that through a union backed job in clean energy, you can support your husband or wife, your children, have a home in the community, and come home safely every day. So I think that's a vision that's worth fighting for.
And I'll just say to the audience here, we're always having these debates on the left. It's like, how do we change the composition of people who consider themselves to be on the left or be socialists or be progressives, right? Because it does trend one way, on the education scale. This is a policy that we can all get behind, that we can say with a straight face, with facts behind us, this is a job that is investing in our future in terms of climate change and also directly investing in working class communities, providing a higher standard of living for working people. And I think that the argument is as clear as day. I know we've went a little bit over, but I do have two quick ones for you, if that's okay.
Totally. Got all
All
the
right.
time in the world.
Well, I mean, there's more we're not gonna be able to get to today. It just means we'll have to get you on again soon to do more. But the first one I wanted to ask you is that I'm trying not to be depressing, but there's a lot of stuff out there that is bleak, right?
Yes.
You do, as you noted at the very beginning, like you look at like the history of a country like France, like that provides like a model for something like green growth, right? Where you can have economic
Mhm.
development and have it not be attached to the consumption of more and more fossil fuels. Something the degrowthers like refuse to reckon with, that there is like a history of this in a
Mhm.
country that a lot of lefties love to praise for other reasons, but for nuclear
Right.
for some reason not. But we've seen what's been happening with these pushes in Germany, with what happened in New York City. What happens for the most part when they decommission these nuclear plants?
I mean, it is unambiguous. Everywhere that nuclear is shut down, emissions go up and reliance on fossil fuels increases. I mean, no one has spent more on an energy transition than Germany. Through 2025, I think they will have spent about 580 billion US dollars on renewables, storage, transmission, and they this year have burned more fossil fuels than, or last year burned more fossil fuels than any year since 2018. Their emissions are stagnant, and they're not even close to as clean as France is, while France has been, destroying its nuclear fleet for the past 20 years, which is a whole nother story.
Hmm.
But France is still 8 times cleaner than German electricity for roughly half the cost.
Hmm.
So, and Indian Point, same example, except even more dangerous because you close down a plant, you know, the arguably the heart of America, New York City, right there at a choke point for energy. And we're seeing in New England, as a result of other closures, that now oil is suddenly making a big resurgence on the grid. So I think we're we're in a different position than we were 2 years ago.
Hmm.
I think it's that recognition of nuclear's importance, and we've seen the Biden administration and other government agencies act in a way to signal this new commitment to nuclear. And we've seen Diablo Canyon is,
Hmm.
that's still fraught. They're still working out the kinks, but politicians voted to save Diablo Canyon. Politicians in Illinois voted to save their nuclear plants. But like you said, it gets tiring being on the back foot.
Yeah.
Someone's got to articulate a vision for, okay, it's not enough to just continue to wean off of past achievements. How do we do that again? How do we build something will that future generations can continue to benefit from?
And look, I'm just gonna say this, for people on the left, it's like we got to be really smart here, because if the green left and this movement keeps on lining up against union unions and organized labor, I mean, it's a bad strategy for the kind of things that we want to achieve. The last question I have for you is a little close to home. But
Mhm.
in North Texas, Comanche Peak nuclear power plant, its licenses are set to expire in 2030 and 2023 for its two
Mhm.
nuclear units. There's a growing push. I don't know about how significant or long lasting it will be, but I've been seeing enough of it to talk about it, to try to push them to not renew these licenses. And, there's been reporters going out talking to folks. A classic story, they talked to a farmer who's very worried about living near a nuclear plant. If you had the opportunity to talk to, a nice fellow from North Texas who had concerns and was thinking that they should maybe try to push to not renew these licenses, I mean, we've been sort of making it through other thing, but what kind of case would you make to them about why it's so critical for us to be making sure that we keep these plants online and hopefully expanding them?
Well, I would make an argument of self-interest. And everywhere that we've seen nuclear power plants close prematurely, it has been extremely devastating to the local areas, the towns, the communities that hosted them. So, for example, north of me in Zion, Illinois, they lost their nuclear plant in 1998. And that was a yearly annual income loss of $20 million. So, you drive up there and there are empty businesses, empty storefronts, abandoned strip malls. Property taxes have more than doubled. About 2/3 of the single family homes are now rented out. Many people have moved out of Zion, and they just described the cycle that's happened where businesses are driven away by high taxes, which increases taxes, and they don't know how to get out from under that. And even more recently, in 2014, Vernon, Vermont lost the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant. And it was devastating. I mean, Vermont's emissions have increased twice as much as the rest of the nation since that time. And they had to have their town budget. They lost, they used to have nuclear engineers that would work as substitute teachers and tutors at their public schools. That was gone. So, you know, again, set aside the environment, set aside the energy security, set aside all of those more abstract things, that it becomes really personal when you say this could be devastating for your town, your community, your neighbors, not only through the direct loss of jobs, but just everything that nuclear plants provide. They truly are economic engines.
Well, I think that's a great case. I really appreciate your time. I mean, could you just give people a quick pitch for the campaign for a green nuclear deal and let people know who might be interested in helping out support the work that y'all are doing over there? Tell them where they can go.
Yeah, so like I said, I was very tired of constantly feeling like I was on my back foot, and I didn't see anyone articulating a vision for what practical but optimistic nuclear growth in America could look like. So I started the campaign for a green nuclear deal to talk about how we can best right the ship to get that scaled up decarbonization that we know based on history is absolutely possible with nuclear. So we do things like just talk to people about to bust those misconceptions, to make the case for nuclear. We talk to politicians about repealing moratoria, opening themselves up to opportunities from the nuclear industry for their coal power plant replacement. Just basically whatever we can do to help build nuclear, help start building nuclear in the US. So right now, I'm completely independent of big NGO money or any energy industry interests. It's just my Patreon and like a few subscribers to my brand new Substack, Splitting the Atom. So you can check me out on Patreon, Campaign for a Green Nuclear Deal, or Substack, maddihilly.substack.com. And I would appreciate any and all support because I think this work is really important.
I totally agree. We'll be Left Reckoning will be sure to join up on the Patreon very soon. Maddie Hilly, I really do appreciate you taking some time to to chat with me, and hopefully we can do this again in the future because there's a lot of things I think that still need to be said.
I would love that. Thank you for having me on. I'd love to be on anytime.
Hell yeah.